Thank you very much for inviting me. I'm very honored to be here, and I've looked at your profiles as well, and I've enjoyed all the conversations and look forward to having many more. So this 20 minutes that I'll talk is to dive in a little bit to my personal story. I like to share a few of the frameworks that I've built along the way that helped me through my journey, and then maybe have a few examples, few conversations about innovation. So we're going to cover all that in 20 minutes. Like every good personal story, it starts with my parents. I am the son of 2 educators. I am the last of 6 kids. There are 17 years difference between myself and my eldest brother. And by the time I was 15 years old, I was working in consulting. That was summer work, of course. I was still going to school. And the industry was technology, and it was mostly focused on banking. And by the time I was a freshman in college, I had realized, you know what? I'm meant for something else. And I want to change the world. But simple thing, right? When you're a young guy, I want to change the world. I want to do big things. And I started to dive into politics a little bit, and I did an internship with a senator. I did an internship with a congressman. I worked at a law firm. I went to graduate school, got my master's in public administration with a concentration in science and technology policy in the early 90s, before the internet really came on the scene. And I was gearing myself towards going right into government. And I got a call from the consulting company I had worked for, not the banking group, but the technology, the government group. And they said, how about you change government from the outside versus the inside, and I'll pay you twice as much. And I was about to get married, and I was paying for my own wedding. And my wife and I said, you know what, let's give it a 2-year shot. And 2 years in, I was running a $15 million, actually $12 million project with 30 people doing a tax system implementation that was migrating them from mainframe to client server. Everybody using those terms? Anybody familiar with those terms? Yeah, we all know those, right? And one day I turned to my wife, because I was traveling all the time, and we were thinking of having children. I said, what am I doing? Like, why am I here? And I stepped back and I built this. Because everybody talks about the what, right? But and I can go deep on talking about frameworks for the what, but I was really interested in who I was. What was I passionate about, and what was I good at? I'm passionate about making government better, doing big things, using collaboration to drive innovation. I'm good at building frameworks, building teams, getting folks aligned and motivated to make big things happen. Then I had to say, well, why am I doing it? What do I think about? Standard of living, location, family, friends, community, hobbies, health. What did all those things mean to me? What did I want? What did my family want? What was going to be important? And this became a framework that I started to use. And I stayed in consulting, but I shifted. I went more towards management consulting. I moved from IT implementation into management consulting, and I dove into a research project while I was working on how could you get leaders to action fast, and came up with this framework as one of the 4 tenets of the paper. But the 2 constructs in there we're very comfortable with. One is having a leader, somebody who sets the vision and the direction. The manager, who's somebody who keeps the trains running on time. The third one people refer to as like the consigliere, the coach, the chief of staff. And I put in there as the navigator. Somebody who knows the landscape, understands what's going on, knows where the bodies are buried, knows how to get things done. And sometimes you have multiples of these. Sometimes they play the inside game. Sometimes they play the outside game. But whatever you put in the middle of these three people goes. It's amazing if you start to look at it. So I then migrated over to the National Academy of Public Administration. I became the Vice President of Strategic Initiatives there, and that's where I launched the Collaboration Project. And the whole intent of the Collaboration Project was to look at how can collaboration drive innovation in government. Remember that third thing I'm passionate about? And the first thing I was passionate about? Oh, and the second thing I was passionate about? That was that, right? I found a home to do that. And in digging into the Collaboration Project, discovered that we were at a pretty interesting juncture. This is about 2005, where there's a collision of four forces. Wikinomics. Has anybody read this book? Don Tapscott, Anthony Williams. This was a pretty important piece for me. It would talk about openness and peering, Web 2.0, the idea of how you're pulling people into the problem and using technology to do that, and what it was enabling. Medici effect. Anybody read this? Franz Johansson. This is all about this group. The idea of how can you pull more culture, more diversity into solving a problem. The Renaissance was sparked by putting money out and having many cultures come together, trying to take advantage of that time and solve new problems and do new things. Swarm intelligence. That the more data that you have, and the importance of the individual actor in that and what they know and what they learn, when you pull that together, presents a very good, very sound knowledge and information. And the fourth one is transparency. And we hear a lot about transparency. I'll talk a little bit more about it in a minute. But the idea that putting information out there that's discoverable, usable, actionable is becoming the norm. Right? And what does that mean? And at the collision of these four forces are speed, reach, and agility. And I started to refer to the collision of these four forces as the collaborative era. That we had moved from the industrial era, and we're in a whole new era of collaboration. And that using those four forces were becoming the norm to get things done. And then I was asked by the person the vice president had tapped to run the recovery program to be his deputy. And the recovery program was a $787 billion stimulus that we injected into the United States economy. It had over 200 programs. Many of them were new, not a lot of infrastructure in place for some of these. And we had a goal of 70% of that money being out the door in people's hands in 18 months. $787, 18 months. Very small team reporting to the Vice President of the United States. And he had was very involved in the program and had high expectations for the program that we would respond to any question within 24 hours. Even if the answer was, we will get back to you in such and such a time, we had the culture of getting back to people in 24 hours. And I'll tell you why that's important in a second. So this just gives you a flavor of the distribution. Also, you have 26 federal agencies, but when you're working with this is an intergovernmental approach. So we were working across 26 agencies, but it was 50 states and hundreds of cities. Plus, we had a lot of associations that we were working with and a lot of different stakeholders to keep involved in the process. So I showed you this. Well, that we're in the collaborative era, which is agility, reach, and efficiency, and I have to implement this, and it looked like running into that, right? This is in the industrial era, and for those of you, most of your daily existence, you get exposed to this, the lovely silos of excellence, right? They're very rigid, lots of oversight, lots of mandates, fragmented accountability, and inability to move resources around, right? And to me, it felt like a model like this, where you're constantly having to self-aggregate results across silos. Right? That's the industrial era. And when I looked at, in order to respond in 24 hours to anything across a massive system like that, what do you need? You need data, right? And we had to get that really fast and be able to respond. And so if you think about how these guys work, they rely on a lot of data and get you results really fast, customized to you. And that's what this model looks like. They're an outcome broker. They provide information, education, and technical assistance to enable you to get something new done, to achieve a new outcome. Okay. So in leaving the White House, I stepped back and I thought about a lot of this when we were done. I'm very proud of the program and the results. And sort of saying, how did we make all that go? And then I wrote a paper called Can Government Work Like Open Table? And that's where these pictures are from. And Open Table is a restaurant reservation tool in the United States, just as a point of reference, because I'm not sure they're a fully global company. But so what makes these things go? How do outcome brokers work? Well, they need data, right? So let's talk about data. Open data. This is the transparency movement. There's a lot of data out there. Governments are pushing data out. The Recovery Act, we had recovery.gov. You can still go to it. We publicly tracked a large portion of the spend, so you could see what was happening with it. But it's not just about fraud, waste, and abuse. It's also about building new businesses and new business models. It's also about creating new efficiencies. Remember, the data needs to be discoverable, usable, and actionable. Big data. This is where I pause to see if we have any Star Trek fans. So we have some Star Trek fans, so I'm in family here. But velocity, volume, and variable data. Large amounts of data. We're generating lots of data. Yesterday we talked about Street Bump. Street Bump generates a lot of data, right? How many people have something on their wrist to track their health? Anybody in this room have one of these guys? It's my guy over here, another one over here. Very common now, but think about what this generates every day. Think about what your PDA generates every day. Lots of information, the Internet of Things. Lots of information, a lot of data. And so one of the questions that outcome brokers look at is, what is the innovation that occurs at the intersection between silos? When you go into the white space and you bring that data together, what does it do? To enable that, you need technology. And I'm at Amazon Web Services. How many people here know Amazon Web Services? Okay, so the cloud, right? I work in the cloud for government. The cloud, as we've talked about it since 2006 at Amazon, is the idea of being able to go online and provision the hardware and software that you need when you need it at a really low cost. It's variable, so it can go up and go down, and you only pay for what you use. And if you think about this picture, how many of you procure technology today? And how long does it take? There's a whole new era of being able to go get it and get what you need. And think about what that means for you when you can get all this infrastructure in minutes by going online. And then you can have a petabyte scale data warehouse for like $1,000 a year. It's just a different frame of mind, right? When you have that and you're not locked into all of your on-premise stuff, think about what it can mean to do innovation. And so this is an example from Cancer Research UK where they took data, cancer data, genomic data, and load it into a game where you, in going through an asteroid field, you're doing research. You chart your course, that's one sort of research. You fly through, you suck up space dust and get points, that's more research. You shoot asteroids, that's more research. This is a real game. You can go on iTunes and download it. Go to the App Store and download it. That's an interesting intersection of data and cloud, right, and technology. How many people have seen Rogers' diffusion curve? I use this all the time. This is from 1962. And when you're thinking about change efforts, think about how you're working and who you're working with in order to drive something new. Right? These are the people who are off and running when you want to try and make something happen. Okay? Now, I have an example of this. And I'm almost at time and I'm almost done, but I'm going to still play this one video for you.
If you've learned a lot about leadership and making a movement, then let's watch a movement happen start to finish in under 3 minutes and dissect some lessons. First, of course, a leader needs the guts to stand alone and look ridiculous. But what he's doing is so simple, it's almost instructional. This is key. You must be easy to follow. Now here comes the first follower with a crucial role. He publicly shows everyone else how to follow. Notice how the leader embraces him as an equal. So it's not about the leader anymore. It's about them, plural. Notice how he's calling to his friends to join in. So it takes guts to be a first follower. You stand out and you brave ridicule yourself. Being a first follower is an underappreciated form of leadership. The first follower transforms a lone nut into a leader. If the leader is the flint, the first follower is the spark that really makes the fire. Now here's the second follower. This is a turning point. It's proof the first has done well. Now it's not a lone nut and it's not two nuts. 3 is a crowd and a crowd is news. A movement must be public. Make sure outsiders see more than just the leader. Everyone needs to see the followers because new followers emulate followers, not the leader. Now here come 2 more people, then 3 more immediately. Now we've got momentum. This is the tipping point, and now we have a movement. As more people jump in, it's no longer risky. If they were on the fence before, there's no reason not to join in now. They won't stand out, they won't be ridiculed, and they will be part of the in crowd if they hurry. And over the next minute you'll see the rest who prefer to stay part of the crowd, because eventually they'd be ridiculed for not joining. And ladies and gentlemen, that is how a movement is made. So let's recap what we've learned. If you are a version of the shirtless dancing guy, all alone, remember the importance of nurturing your first few followers as equals, making everything clearly about the movement, not you. Be public, be easy to follow. But the biggest lesson here, did you catch it? Leadership is over-glorified. Yes, it started with the shirtless guy, and he'll get all the credit, but you saw what really happened. It was the first follower that transformed a lone nut into a leader. There's no movement without the first follower. See, we're told that we all need to be leaders, but that would be really ineffective. The best way to make a movement, if you really care, is to courageously follow and show others how to follow. When you find a lone nut doing something great, have the guts to be the first person to stand up and join in.
you guys were into it too, right? Some of you, though, are like, those people are crazy. Those people are not, I do not want anything to do with those people. I didn't want to be at that festival. Others of you are like, I wish I was there, man. That's a good time. The point of the video is that it's when you engage in these efforts, they're movements, right? It's not necessarily just about leadership. You're creating a movement to drive to a new outcome, to a new place. It doesn't happen overnight, right? But people step out, and then other people start to join. And that curve will happen if you create the movement. You are a movement if you're trying to drive change. The who and the why are as important, if not more so, than the what. I believe if you know who you are and why you're doing it, it can drive the thing that you're doing. A lot of people come to me asking for jobs, and the first thing I ask them is, what are you passionate about? Know your role. Are you a leader, a manager, a navigator? And the thing about that chart I didn't show you with the Venn diagram is somebody's navigator is somebody else's leader. That gets pretty complicated. It takes a little bit longer. But if you think about how that works in your organization, even for you today, and there really isn't just one leader, ever. It's such a complex world we go through. You're in the collaborative era. Remember that, where you work. The world around you is in a new era. Even if you work like you're in the industrial era, you are in the collaborative era now. Look at your tools, the data, and the technology to drive change. They're absolutely critical. Innovation is a movement. And this piece I read in a book review when I was in graduate school. If you could just take a second to read that. I'm not a big reader. I don't like to read out loud when I present. We freely choose the direction in which to look. So what movement or outcome broker are you going to start or join? It's not always about starting something. So you want me to hit the last slide? Thank you.